So you think our banking crisis was bad in 2008? It was, but try Iceland's. That country's three largest banks failed. You heard me right. No bailout, no TARP. They just failed. Their banks took the same leveraged bets ours did, but their government took the opposite approach of the U.S. So did the world end? Hardly so, David.
Liz Klayman is in Davos, Switzerland at the World Economic Forum with a leader who had to make that tough choice.
David, the world hardly froze up and ended for Iceland. After the government let their biggest banks fail, sure, they had major problems, 10% unemployment. Their market lost 90% of its value. But today it is a much different story. We want to hear about this from the President of Iceland, Ólafur Grímsson. Welcome, Mr. President.
Thank you
very much.
Thank you.
Thrilled to have you. You know, in the U.S., a lot of people still wonder what would have happened had we let our banks fail. I know it's on a completely different scale, but talk about your experience and back then in 2008, how difficult it was to allow something like that to happen.
Well, although the scale is different in Iceland, I think basically all modern states, whether they are large and small, face similar challenges and could apply similar solutions. So in our case, we decided to let the banks fail. They were private banks. And as I've sometimes said, I have never understood why somehow banks are the holy churches of the modern economy, whereas it is normal to let other companies go bankrupt and fail. Suddenly, when a bank is in trouble, everybody comes rushing and says, no, 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 this can't happen. Some people say we didn't have the money to keep them going. To some extent, that is true. But it was also a part of a comprehensive policy where, on many other issues, we went against the orthodox financial view prevailing in the United States and Europe. And now, 4 years later or so, Iceland is recovering in a remarkable way. We have 3% economic growth. We have 5% unemployment. The state finances are in a reasonable shape. So, by going against the established orthodox views prevailing in the US and Europe, we actually managed to create a recovery which is quite remarkable.
So you didn't look at the banks as these golden children that needed to be protected and coddled and saved?
No, absolutely not. These were private companies operating fundamentally like private companies, rewarding the bankers and the shareholders. So why, when they fail, should ordinary people, taxpayers, teachers, nurses, workers, pay the price and bear the burden?
You also did something a little unconventional, and that was right away, at least in the first year, you didn't resort to austerity. You upped social spending in certain programs, but then eventually you implemented some, as I understand it, 100 different taxes. How did that not slow down the growth that you had finally gotten?
Well, when you are taking a nation through a profound financial crisis, and although we are now back on course, we should not forget this created enormous hardships for ordinary families in Iceland who lost, many of them, their houses, some of them their entire savings. So if you're going to bring a nation through a profound crisis like this back on the road to recovery, you have to enable them to see justice done. You have to empower them. You have to make them realize that everybody is paying into
the system.
Yeah, into the system in this way. And
does it surprise you that 48% of Americans don't pay at least the important chunk of taxes?
Well, yes, to some extent it does, because I believe we have to realize that if a democracy is going to deal with a profound financial crisis like this, you have to instigate the political process in such a way that people are willing to bear the burden and face the sacrifices if they see justice done in a democratic way. So what we did was not only to go against the traditional view of the fiscal policies, the taxing policies and the welfare state. We also introduced currency controls. We devalued our currency.
David Cameron, the UK leader, is making news by giving a major speech in which he in essence says that he wants to, if you just read through between the lines, distance himself a bit from the Eurozone. You have suspended talks about becoming a member of the Eurozone, yet one of the social democratic ministers in your country, Kirsten Juliusdottir, is saying we have to be a part of the Eurozone. It will be dynamic for our economy. Will you ever be a part of the Eurozone as long as you're president?
Well, I don't think it's related to my presidency or not, but it's absolutely clear that whereas the Eurozone looked appealing for about a year after our bank's collapse, it's a completely different picture today.
Ólafur Grímsson, President of Iceland, we appreciate you being on Fox
Thank you
Business.
very much. It's very great to be with you.
It's a pleasure. Thank you very much. David, interesting and completely different way of handling a banking crisis than the United States did. Back to you.